Just a few days ago, my favorite album ever turned 18 years old, and that's Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age. And other than making me feel old, I started to think about why this album is so good and why I think it's a modern classic. So in this video, I want to talk about some different things on why this is such a great album. I mean, you can't even hear it. So I discovered the band through this album actually, and I remember we had this area at high school with a TV, and on the TV we always had MTV on. I didn't have MTV at home, and this was before internet was like really available at every home, so I was sort of clueless to what was going on with different bands, and yeah, I was just really behind on everything. And while we were sitting there and talking, I heard this really fascinating music in the background. I think it was the groove that got my attention. So I walked over to the TV and I instantly knew that this is something that I never heard before. Not just the band, but the type of music. It was just really fascinating to me. And since I only knew about Guns N' Roses and AC/DC at the time, I started to ask around, who is this band? I need to know now. And I remember someone said, I think it's Foo Fighters, but the drummer from Nirvana is playing drums again. So yeah, I don't know what's going on here. And at the end of the song, I saw what the song was called and what the band was called. And I need to admit, I think I went on Napster or LimeWire. Do you guys remember LimeWire? I think I went on there to get the album because we didn't have a record store nearby. It would probably take me 3 weeks to get the album, which I did later on. I paid for it, I promise. And yeah, that was how I was introduced to the band and to the album. I really liked No One Knows, which was the song that was played on MTV that day. Since the whole thing was kind of new to me, it took me a while to get into the full album, but when I did, there was no going back. And listening to the album now, I think one of the main reasons to why it got so big and why it's still so good is that it has really good songs at its core. So if you removed all of the personnel and the production, I think all of the songs would do really good just playing them acoustically, and that's something that I've seen Queens of the Stone Age do several times. Again, the songs are just amazing, all of them. Maybe not Six Shooter. I'm not a big fan of that one. I always skip that one. It's okay. But yeah, it really doesn't matter if you have Dave Grohl on drums or you have really good guitar sounds. The songs needs to be good, and they are. And then you have the sound, and more specifically the guitar tones on this record. That was something that really drew me into it. And since I was just completely clueless about anything back then, I didn't know what guitar tone was. Or to me, that was a knob on my guitar that said tone. So when someone talked about this guy has a really good guitar tone, I was thinking, did he place his tone knob at the right point and that sounds better than the other places? I didn't know anything about it, but this album opened up and made me realize that guitars, distorted guitars that is, sound different and that it adds something to the songs. So the guitar tones on this album is something that I see go along with a theme that the band often is working around, and that is big contrasts. So most of the guitars are tuned down to C standard, which is something that you most often see in more heavier bands, but they don't necessarily use that much gains. There you have sort of like the first contrast going on. And also with the down tuning, you don't often see the band droning on the lower end of that spectrum. They often play higher up on the fret, so you could basically play the songs on a standard tuned guitar, but then sometimes they go down to the lower frequencies and then you have like a big cool contrast, and I think that's pretty unique. And as you probably know, they used way different amps than most other people did back then. They didn't use Marshalls or Mesa Boogies. They often used cheaper transistor amps, and anything weird that was not normal seemed to be a good fit for this album. The next cool thing about the album is the fact that it had 3 different vocalists. You had Josh, you had Mark Lanigan, and then you had Nick Oliveri. You had Josh singing most of the songs, but on the other end you had Nick Oliveri screaming and singing with a rougher voice, and sort of in between them you have Mark Lanigan, and I mean, come on, he's just great. So there again you have the contrast. You have Josh's voice and then you have Nick and Mark's voice, which are really different, and I think that makes the album more interesting to listen to. Then you have the drums, and I think this is pretty much the best drum album recorded ever. I think the sound is great, the playing is just insanely good. I know it's a cliche that guitar players often tend to like Dave Grohl's drumming, but to me he is just on a different level on most things on drums. And I know that he didn't necessarily write most of the drum parts. I think a lot of them came from the previous drummer, but his attack and playing is just so good, and the sound is really unique. You know, they recorded the drums separate from the cymbals, which I guess is a big part of how the drum sounds. You know, I bought a drum kit quite recently, and definitely one of my goals there is to play some of the songs on Songs for the Deaf. They are pretty hard though. And also, as a Queens of the Stone Age nerd, there's almost a myth around the whole recording and how the album was made. So the album was produced by Eric Valentine, but the band has later stated that they fired him and that he really didn't do that much. Eric Valentine, on the other hand, has always claimed that he produced the album, and honestly I think that he did. I don't know why the band or Josh wants to downplay Eric Valentine's role on the album, but it makes for an interesting story, I think, and I still feel like I want to know more what really happened there when they recorded this album that I really like. If you are interested in the Queens of the Stone Age guitar tone, you should check out this video. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye.